The chief executive says Article 23 legislation will also tackle organizations set up by foreign agents that could endanger national security. The Cathay Pacific Flight Attendants Union will launch a Work to Rule campaign on Thursday. And China records its first population fall in decades. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. Chief Executive John Lee has revealed the SAR government is set to implement Article 23 of the Basic Law this year at the earliest. He noted the new local security law will tackle spy activity and organizations set up by foreign agents that could endanger national security. Jackie Lin reports.
With the Beijing-decreed national security law in place, the SAR government is poised to move forward the local legislation of Article 23 of the Basic Law, which is another national security law in Hong Kong. Article 23 outlaws 7 types of crimes, while the national security law criminalizes 4 categories of offenses, namely secession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign forces. The SAR government looks set to cover the remaining security law-related acts, including treason, incitement of treason, and theft of state secrets. In an interview with Hong Kong Commercial Daily, Chief Executive John Lee revealed the Security Bureau has already finished the first draft of Article 23 legislation work. Lee has asked the Security Bureau to prepare the second draft of Article 23 with the most extreme scenarios considered. The Bureau will also look into the national security work of other common law jurisdictions with the Department of Justice. For the first time, Lee indicated clear targets for the enactment of Article 23 with details to be included in the second draft. They include anti-espionage activity and organizations set up by foreign agents in Hong Kong that intend to endanger national security. He added security loopholes arising from new media and technology should be plugged through Article 23. Lee added the government is also studying overseas law on the regulation of news. While he said the most ideal situation is that the industry sets out guidelines itself, the CE warned journalists should be aware of people who spread their political agenda through fake information. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
John Lee also revealed that he hopes to axe all COVID restrictions within this year, including the mask mandate and the isolation order for COVID patients. The CE added he is keen to implement the second phase of quarantine-free travel between Hong Kong and the mainland as soon as possible. On the pandemic front, Hong Kong reported 3,843 new COVID cases today, marking a decline for 11 straight days. 23 COVID cases were detected across 20 residential care homes for the elderly and the disabled. 756 infections were reported across 450 schools. Another 46 patients died from COVID. The Cathay Pacific Airways Flight Attendants Union had earlier filed an application to stage a rally at Cathay City tomorrow, but it's understood the application has now been withdrawn. Meanwhile, Cathay and Hong Kong Express have cancelled more than 100 flights between the city and Japan next month, citing restrictions imposed by Japan.
The Cathay Pacific Airways Flight Attendants Union has been fighting for better pay and working conditions. In its latest statement, the cabin crew union said it will begin its Work to Rule campaign on Thursday because there has been more workload, but with 1 fewer crew member scheduled to work on each flight. That means the workers would only do the bare minimum required by the rules of the contract, and they would not work on their scheduled days off. This Cathay passenger is not happy with the union's move, saying what they're doing would impact on people's travel plans during the Lunar New Year holidays. But this man says he understands why the union is taking action in peak travel season and hopes they can strike a balance between taking industrial action and maintaining flight operations. The airline said it had been in touch with aircrew members, adding most of the issues had been properly addressed. It also promised to keep flight services running as usual. Meanwhile, Cathay Pacific announced that between February the 3rd and 16th, 50 flights heading to Narita, Kansai, Nagoya and Fukuoka have been scrapped. It noted that Japanese authorities had put a cap on the number of flights allowed in from Hong Kong for each carrier. Cathay's subsidiary budget airline Hong Kong Express is also subject to the same restrictions. A total of 60 flights to Japan in the first half of February will be affected. A Hong Kong Express employees group claimed in a social media post that many staff had quit after getting their bonuses, which led to insufficient manpower to support the airline's operation. The airline did not respond directly to inquiries about this, but stressed it will try its best to minimize the impact on travelers. Meanwhile, no adjustments have been made on flights to Japan for Hong Kong Airlines, Greater Bay Airlines and Japan Airlines. The All Nippon Airways has even added 3 more flights to Narita by the end of the month.
China's population declined for the first time in 6 decades, falling by 850,000 last year. But the country's economic growth last year was 3%, exceeding expectations.
According to figures announced by the National Bureau of Statistics, or the NBS, today, China's population fell by 850,000 from 2021 to approximately 1.41 billion in 2022. Over the past 10 years, the country's population growth each year has been slowing down, with only an increase of 480,000 in 2021. From last year, the figures even started to dip, marking a first decline in the country's population in 61 years. In 2022, 9.56 million babies were born. China's birth rate hit a record low, 6.77 births per 1,000 people. The only figure going up is the death rate. Last year, 10.41 million people died in China, a 270,000 increase from the year before. That makes a record high death rate, 7.37 deaths per 1,000 people. Experts say the drop in the number of women of childbearing age as well as the COVID epidemic have resulted in people less willing to give birth. Meanwhile, China's GDP went up by 3% year-on-year. That's higher than the market prediction of 2.7%. NBS data showed that China's surveyed urban employment rate came in at 5.5% in December last year, an improvement of 0.2 percentage points from the previous month. A total of 12.06 million new urban jobs were created last year, exceeding the annual target of 11 million.
Elsewhere, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will meet China's new Foreign Minister Qin Gang on February the 5th and 6th, the news outlet Politico reported, citing diplomats familiar with his travel plans. An official spokesman in Beijing later said China would welcome Blinken. The reported trip comes in the wake of the meeting between U.S. President Joe Biden and President Xi Jinping in November on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Indonesia. Biden said at the time the meeting would open the door for more exchanges between the two countries amid heightened tensions over a number of issues, including Taiwan, China's military buildup in South China Sea, and American influence in the region. Wang Wenbin, spokesman for China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, said Beijing has always viewed and developed Sino-U.S. relations in accordance with 3 principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence and win-win cooperation proposed by President Xi Jinping. Wang also said Beijing hopes that the U.S. will establish a correct understanding of China, insist on dialogue rather than confrontation, and win-win rather than zero-sum. The death toll from Saturday's missile strike on a Dnipro residential building in central east Ukraine keeps rising. Officials say 40 people have died and dozens remain missing after a 9-story building was destroyed by a Russian Kh-22 missile designed to neutralize battleships. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the attack highlighted the need for faster supplies of defensive weapons. Nazvi Karim reports.
Around 100 Ukrainian troops arrive in the United States to learn about the Patriot missile system. Britain ready to send Challenger 2 main battle tanks to help Ukraine's armed forces meet their Russian foes head-on along the front lines. And German Chancellor Olaf Scholz being urged to give the green light to send Leopard tanks to Ukraine. Western allies eager to provide military aid to Kiev. But this tragedy in Dnipro is proof, according to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, that the help must come faster. In his daily address to the nation, Zelensky said Saturday's missile strike in Dnipro showed that Russia was making a fresh attempt to seize the initiative in the 11-month-old war. He urged allies to speed up the decision-making process, possibly hinting at Scholz, who has been reluctant to make the German Leopards available to Ukraine unless there is agreement among Kiev's main allies. Britain's Defence Secretary Ben Wallace says the consensus he seeks is already forthcoming, insisting the Leopards are largely regarded as defensive weapons.
Poland is very keen to donate some leopard, as is Finland, who have expressed. All of this currently relies on the German government's decisions, not only whether the Germans will supply their own leopards, but whether or not they'll give permissions for others. I would urge my German colleagues to do that.
The training of Ukrainians to use a US-built Patriot battery is significant on Zelensky's wish list. This after months of begging the Americans to supply such weapons to counter Russian aerial attacks.
So, soldiers from the Ukrainian Armed Forces have arrived here at the Fire Center of Excellence at Fort Sill, Oklahoma to begin air defense training. This training will consist of operator and maintainer tasks for the Patriot air defense system.
Around 500 Ukrainian soldiers are also training in Germany under US military supervision on combat and ground battle techniques. Nazri Karim, TVB News.
Italy's #1 fugitive, mafia boss Matteo Messina Denaro, was arrested Monday after 3 decades on the run. Denaro is considered the top boss of the Sicilian mob known as Cosa Nostra, even as a fugitive. He was finally captured at a private clinic in Palermo, Sicily, where he was receiving treatment for an undisclosed medical condition. Denaro was tried in absentia and convicted of dozens of murders and faces multiple life sentences. His crimes included 2 bombings in Sicily in 1992 that killed 2 top anti-mafia prosecutors. Among other grisly crimes he was convicted of, the murder of a mafia turncoat's young son. Welcome back to TVB News. Since the return of quarantine-free travel between the mainland and Hong Kong more than a week ago, the Immigration Department said an estimated 340,000 people have travelled across the border. Starting Wednesday, the department will begin providing a new service reminding residents to renew their travel documents before they expire. Timothy Lee tells us more.
The long-awaited quarantine-free travel between the mainland and the city promptly attracted thousands of people to cross-border checkpoints. The Immigration Department announced in the 9 days since the resumption of quarantine-free travel, around 80% of the 207,000 people traveling up north were Hong Kongers. Meanwhile, mainland residents accounted for 20% of the 140,000 people who arrived in the city. The majority of travelers crossed the border via the Lok Ma Chau spur line. Regarding the manpower issue at the city's immigration control points, the department said it remains flexible in the redeployment of staff according to necessity.
You may realize during the last 3 years, when most of the control points were closed, many of our manpower has been deployed to support our other duties. So when we prepare for the reopening of some of the major control points, then we have deployed back all our staff back to the control points to get prepared to ensure the smooth operation of all these control points. Roughly, there's around 2,000 staff has been redeployed back to the control point to maintain the operation. But I must stress that the situation is rather fluid at the moment.
For the past few years under the pandemic, many in the city were unable to travel and saw their travel documents expire. The Immigration Department announced that it will remind travelers starting on Wednesday to renew their travel documents 7 months prior to expiration through the I Am Smart mobile phone app. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
The government announced today they will raise the total number of tickets for the high-speed rail link with the mainland to 20,000 per day from tomorrow. This is tickets for certain dates to Guangzhou have been sold out or only standby tickets are left. As the Lunar New Year is approaching, dozens of travelers were seen trying to buy train tickets at West Kowloon Railway Station at around 7 a.m. today. Some said they still have a hard time getting one, despite more tickets on sale. It might partly be due to some purchase channels not being able to synchronize the updates of ticket sales. All tickets to Guangzhou South and Guangzhou East on January 18th and 19th have been sold out. A London Metropolitan Police officer has admitted raping and sexually assaulting a dozen women over a 17-year period. David Carrick pleaded guilty to 49 offences, including rape, attempted rape, assault and false imprisonment. The 48-year-old officer had joined the Met in 2001 and served with the Parliamentary and Diplomatic Protection Command. The Metropolitan Police already dealing with a loss of confidence following the rape and murder of Sarah Everard by a serving officer in 2021, apologized for the latest revelations. Carrick met some of the women through online dating sites or on social occasions. Met Assistant Commissioner Barbara Gray said the pattern of abusive behavior should have been spotted earlier. Carrick will be sentenced in February. The streets of a Spanish village were filled with smoke, burning wood and the clatter of trotting hooves as an annual festival returned on Monday. Horses galloped through bonfires as the dramatic Las Luminarias festival was held in San Bartolomé de Pinares. Bonfires lined the streets of the village in the central Castilla-León region. Riders take their horses as near as they dare to the bonfires, saying the smoke that envelops them purifies and protects the horses for the coming year. The festival is held every January 16th on the eve of the feast of St. Anthony the Abbot, the patron saint of animals. The origins of the festival can be traced back to the 18th century. Back locally, various panels and subcommittees at the Legislative Council have elected their chairpersons for the new legislative year. But there are major changes. The minutes for their meetings will no longer specify which lawmakers made what suggestions or comments. The Legislative Council Secretariat explained that it is to optimize and streamline the minute-taking format, and it would help summarize the gist of lawmakers' comment. Third-side parties lawmaker Teck Chi-yuen said the change could diminish the credibility of the legislature. As some voting processes might also be conducted anonymously, New People's Party lawmaker Dominic Lee said it's better to be more transparent to show the different stances of political groups to their voters. And that's the news. Thanks for watching.